Hey, Krista, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So Krista was just apologizing for having to reschedule a couple of weeks ago, which actually I didn't remember that you rescheduled. But now that you've brought it up, why did you reschedule? Because you started telling me the reason and it was kind of interesting. So I was like, wait, let's tell the listeners.
Well, this is a great story and a good laugh. So we can all start the podcast with a good laugh here. I was at a wedding 2 weeks ago, and at the end of the night, how you take your shoes off because, those heels, yeah. So took them off, walking home. The wedding was at the beach. So, there could have been like broken glass or whatever. So my friend was like, all right, you should probably not walk barefoot here. That sounds like a really terrible idea. You might step on glass. So instead, I got on my friend's back and
Oh,
they tripped on the sidewalk. I went
oh,
over their shoulders,
oh.
straight in my head. It was terrible. I was like literally I was throwing up all night long, like concussion symptoms. Yeah, so then a couple days later took a fun visit to the ER and
Oh,
then
yeah.
CT, the whole 9 yards, and turns out I have a concussion. So
Oh, my gosh.
nothing new. I was a leader growing up, so I hit my head quite a few times before this already. So, the protocol, I was ready for, I was prepared.
So hold on. You may have cut out when you said you were a cheerleader. Did you say you were a cheerleader?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Or-
So,
or-
so you got thrown around a little bit. I'm going to confess that I too was a cheerleader.
Were you really?
I was a cheerleader. Now the listeners know this is something that I don't know if I've talked about in the last 25 years. But in high school, my girlfriend was a cheerleader and she convinced me and some of my baseball friends to do cheerleading. So, we were the ones who, lifted and threw and stuff like that. But I understand what you're saying when you say that you've gotten concussions cheerleading. Now, I was never the cause of a concussion of a girl falling because I would always dive to catch somebody if I had to. But so you've had multiple concussions. You have one now. So how do you heal a concussion?
Brain rest. Literally just like nothing. Like they say, like limit blue lights, stuff like that, and just try not to think of anything that makes you think too hard, which is so hard for me. I'm always thinking, we're always on
Yeah.
our phone. We're glued to our phone nowadays. So yeah, that was a little challenging. I took a couple days off and I was out of work and just kind of rested up and then went back into the salon and took Advil and just kind of took it day by day. And I feel good now, a little sensitive to light here and there, but for the most
Interesting.
part, I think I'm okay.
Okay, well, I guess I'm feeling bad now. Some of the questions that I wrote might be a little difficult, so I'll give you the easy questions.
Okay. So if I don't want to answer a question, I'll just, I'll blame it on the concussion.
That's right. You just claim the concussion, and I'll be like, okay, fine, and I'll move on to the next question.
I'll,
So I have to know, were you doing hair at the wedding, or were you just a normal guest?
no, I was a normal guest, which is so nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, much easier.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, super interesting. So I guess going forward, you'll be careful about riding on people's backs.
Yep. Yep. I will probably not be doing any more piggyback rides.
It's very funny. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you for the audience who doesn't know you yet. You're a Raleigh, North Carolina hairdresser who focuses on balayage. You're a Beauty Launchpad 30 under 30. That is 30 years old. You're very young.
Yeah.
My birthday is coming up, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am. Our listeners probably know how old I am because about once every 10 episodes, I might mention it. You're a 3-time one-shot award finalist. You're a master of balayage educator. Ryan Whedon has been on the show at least once. And you're a podcast co-host, which is
Yep.
always kind of interesting to talk to another podcaster. The name of your podcast is Connect Through Beauty. So we're going to talk about all that. But first, no, what is the infomercial thing? But wait, there's more. Right? So you said that you have a New Year's announcement. So why don't we just get it out of the way now? So what is your New Year's announcement?
So, my New Year's announcement, starting in 2024, I will be continuing my journey as an educator. However, I will be doing it independently versus with Masters of Balayage. Masters of
Okay.
Balayage has been such an incredible experience, but I'm really excited to dip my toes into new and exciting things.
Okay, very exciting. We'll talk about that. But before we talk about any of those details, let's learn a little bit more about you. Where are you from originally, and how did you get in hair?
So I'm originally from New York, actually. I don't even know if it counts because I've been in New York. I was in New York for 10 years, and then I came to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I've been here for 14 years. So people argue and say you're not really from the North. However, I feel like those Northern roots, they just never really leave you. So I think I have a Northern root with like a little bit of a Southern charm. So it's like a good balance between the two. I started my journey in the hair industry straight out of high school. It's really funny. I actually did not want to be a hairstylist. That was not a goal of mine. Throughout high school, I fell in love with makeup. I used to watch beauty gurus all the time. I used to have friends come over and I would actually like pluck their eyebrows for like $10. I mean, it was so silly. I loved the industry. It was fun for me. But I was so scared to go into the industry because I was under the impression that beauty professionals did not make a lot of money. And I'm laughing at myself now because that is totally not the case. So I started cosmetology school straight out of high school. I had a friend of mine who reached out and she's like, hey, you should look into Aveda. Like, I'm going to go to this school. I think you would love it. Like, you should check it out. And I toured, and next thing you know it, I'm signing papers. But when I started school, I actually wanted to be a makeup artist. It was a goal of mine to travel and do makeup and just have fun and play around with all that. But throughout school, I fell in love with balayage, blonding, any sort of dimensional color. It was just so fun to me. It was so tedious. And so my passion, I mean, it completely changed. Now I hate doing makeup and I love doing hair. So it's funny how you really find what you love when you're at least looking for it. That's exactly what happened to me.
100%. And that's why they say try lots of different things.
Yes.
Don't just assume that you like makeup and then and then don't try anything else. You know, you look at some of the people who've done well in their lives, and I'm not talking about like even current day, but you know, some famous people in history, and you look at their backgrounds, and so often they moved, you know, about every 6 months to a year, trying different jobs for the first 10 years of their adulthood before they found the thing that they're really good at and the thing that they really like and the thing that they really like. And then they become famous, you know, in history or whatever, because they did something substantial. And I think that's so good. And I think these days, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the urgency, you know, of young people to get out there and maybe make enough money to support themselves or something. But people seem to have an urgency to choose something very early. And I think it's good to try different things. So that's just kind of a small example of how that benefited you. You like balayage, you like lightening hair better than makeup, and now you don't like doing makeup. That's so interesting. And by the way, 10 years from now, you may be totally over lightening hair, right?
You never know where it could take you, you know?
Exactly. Okay, so you went to Aveda Institute, you get out, and where did you go?
So I actually still work at the salon that I started at, which
Okay.
I'm very fortunate to say that because I know that is not the journey for a lot of hairstylists.
Mm-hmm.
So I started at Lux Salon, which is located in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I started assisting there for about a year. So I did a lot of practicing, a lot of messing up during that time, which was great. I learned a lot very quickly because of those experiences. So I'm super thankful for those. Worked as an assistant for a year. And then after that, I was put on the floor in August of 2019. No, August of 2020, because it was right before, no, August of 2019, because it was right before COVID.
Yeah.
So I was on the floor about 7 months before COVID hit. And then after, which seems like it'd be really hard, but when we came back from COVID, I don't know what it was, but business was booming. I mean, I went from taking, 3 guests a day or 2 guests a day to like 4 or 5 double bookings of balayage and lived in color services, which was super, super awesome. And I've been there ever since. So I'm going on 5 years behind the chair this year, which is so crazy to think. My wrists are definitely starting to hurt. So I'm slowly starting to experience that. I'm 24 years old, so I'm young, but trying to protect my body as much as possible.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so you're so young through COVID. Now tell us, because some of our listeners are from California, some of our listeners are from New York. We were shut down for a lot longer than a lot of other states. In North Carolina, what was that like for you? How long were you prevented from being in the salon?
3 months. So
3
we are
months.
lucky compared to, I know, New York and California. I remember watching it during that time and just like, I can't believe how long you guys were out of the salon for. I
Yeah.
mean,
It was
that's
about
crazy.
a year. It was about a year. We had some fits and starts. They let us go back, for like 4 weeks here, and then they let us go back for like 6 weeks there. But the span of time over the calendar was about that. And the estheticians were actually shut down for longer, because when they opened up hair, like LA County still had the estheticians shut down. Okay, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we hate that. But we talked about that enough. Okay, so you're new, but you've got all this experience, and you're a natural educator from what I can tell. And I'm not just saying that because you've been doing educating. I'm saying it because I've watched some of your education. Tell us, like, to have the success that you've had so quickly, give us kind of your overall impression of why that's been. Like what is it about you? What can you give to the listener that would kind of explain your success so quickly?
Gosh, well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. I have such a passion for education because I was that kid in high school that just had so much trouble understanding information. I was the first kid in 15 years to fail the biology exam, which I know is crazy. 15 years, that's a long time. So I, understood, like I had the information here and then this was my brain, but there was no bridge between the two. So my goal as an educator is to create that bridge for other hairstylists. And one thing that stands out with my teaching versus other educators, because I mean, there's a lot of great, great educators out there. I'm known for my little metaphors that I make. I don't know if you've seen that on my Instagram page, but I have
We'll talk about some of those.
Yeah, we'll get into those, but I have silly little ways to remember how I do something and walk people through that process. Mm-hmm. But growing up, my mom was actually a dance teacher. So I grew up from the age of 2 performing on stage and watching her teach and watching the impact she made on these students and how she was able to express it and explain it in a way where they felt good and they felt like they accomplished something. So educating, honestly, it's just something that I fell into and I absolutely love it. It's definitely something I hope to take, further with where I am now. I'm excited to impact.
All right. So when did you start educating with Masters of Balayage?
I started educating with Masters of Balayage in 2021. So I became an ambassador for them around April of 2020. And then after being an ambassador for a year, they opened up auditions for educators. And I auditioned. I remember that day like it was yesterday because I had to play cameraman, I had to play educator, I had to play hairstylist. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I had this 12-hour window to record this full 10-minute tutorial, edit, and post it before I was going to another hair show later that night. And it was pretty challenging, but honestly, throughout those challenges, like I grew so much from it, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Okay, so you're behind the chair, mm-hmm. and you're an ambassador to things. You're actively submitting things to like One Shot Award. You're Beauty Launchpad 30 Under 30. You've got a podcast. How is that even possible? Like, how do you manage your schedule?
I'm learning how to manage that. I'm trying to find time for myself in there. I just recently started doing Pilates about 6 months ago. So that's been something where like that's me time.
Hmm.
So managing honestly is something that I'm learning, but I love what I do. So it's hard to not work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's everything feels like it just feels like fun and it feels like play. So managing a schedule where you just like absolutely love what you're doing, I mean, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. Well, that's a best case scenario, and if that is the case for you, that's amazing. And I left out, by the way, when I was talking about the list of things that you're doing, I left out content creator, which maybe is incumbent in some of those things that I listed. But you're very active on your Instagram. I don't know if you do TikTok, but you're very active on Instagram, and your videos very professional and educational and good, and of course, people are engaging with it. So you're doing a great job at all that. So it's just very impressive how young you are and how well you've done so far.
So another thing that I think helped me a lot with growing so quickly at such a young age is my age is actually such a big advantage. I saw this TikTok because that's where people my age get their information from. But it said that younger people or Generation Z is able to actually dive in headfirst and they're willing to make the mistake. Whereas millennials and other generations are trying so hard to prevent that mistake from happening. So they're not getting as much work done.
Very interesting. And reminds me of my parents on technology. They're petrified to try anything with their iPhones, right? They're afraid the thing's going to explode. Whereas my kids grab the iPhone and they just indiscriminately press buttons and swipe and do things and grab and pinch and the screen. And so they've learned how to use their phone. I mean, almost immediately versus my parents who still don't know how to use their phone. Maybe it's a little bit of the same thing.
Yeah, that is a really good example.
Let's talk about when you're educating, some of the things that you like to tell your students there. Now, I'm going to kind of throw one out there first, and then you can take it wherever you want to go from there. But one of the things I really liked about one of your kind of educational Instagram posts was you gave 4 kind of easy to understand steps about photography. I think it was like an October 30th post on your Instagram. Number 1, natural light from windows or doors. And I'll just kind of let you, fill in any details if you want. So on that one, a lot of people struggle with photography still. Mm-hmm. You look at their gram or you look at their website or whatever, and the color is just not showing, or they cut off the bottom of the haircut or whatever. So let's just go one by one. Natural light from windows. Yeah, you want to describe how you do it?
Yeah, so I actually stand in front of a doorway. And the reason I stand in front of a doorway when I take photos of my clients is because I can open and close the door to control how much light or how little light I'm actually allowing in, which is awesome because for a blonde, I want to open the door all the way up, have the photo be really bright. But for a brunette, I don't want it to be too overexposed. So I'm going to shut the door a little bit more. That way I can control how much light is actually shining onto that brunette.
Neutral colors.
Yeah.
Neutral colors on the clothing.
Yes, neutral colors are so important. One thing I point out on my feed, if you scroll through my feed, all my models are wearing black. And the reason I do this is because when somebody scrolls through my feed, they can see that it's very cohesive and consistent. So if somebody sees a photo of mine, they instantly know that's me because of the colors she's wearing, the way the hair is styled, and the way she's photographed.
Yes, and that really makes your page look good. Step number 3, use a stool. Do tell.
So using a stool actually allows comfortability for not only the model, but myself. I'm pretty shaky. Half the time when I'm photographing, I haven't eaten, I need food. So I need something to keep me pretty stable. So sitting on a stool actually allows me to rest my elbow on my knee and photograph my model to get a really clear shot.
So hold on, you're on a stool and she's on a stool?
We're both on a stool. Yeah.
I like that. Do you use a stool behind the chair too?
I don't use the stool behind the chair. I don't think my chair goes low enough. I'm already short as if I'm 5'3", so the stool doesn't really help in my half.
Step number 4, turn salon lights off. I love this one. Go ahead.
This was a game changer for me because when you turn the salon lights off in the background, it allows the focus to be on your subject and it creates this natural depth in the background. I photograph with a professional camera, so it automatically creates a little bit of a blur, but deepening the background and creating that darker image just really captures a viewer's eyes directly on the hair.
The subject pop, in this case, the hair pops, doesn't it? And of course, as you're talking about this, I'm looking in my background. I'm in my office and I forgot to turn off the lights in my background.
Look, do you usually turn the lights off?
I do. Well, I've started doing that because I realize that if I turn off the lights, then I'm easier to see on the videos, everything you just described. Okay, so we're gonna pause. I'm gonna go turn off the lights in my background.
Perfect. Boom.
Okay, so the camera's adjusting now. I'm getting a little, it's like a little too bright. Anyway, I'm popping now, aren't I?
You are popping. That's a
Yes.
prime example of why we should turn the salon lights off.
There we go. There's your video, Donovan. There's your highlight video. Okay, so I love that. You've got all sorts of other things like that on your Instagram that deal with photography, that deal with kind of technical stuff with balayage. There was something that you talked about that I really, really liked. Oh, in regards to you kind of described some hacks, for lack of a better word, to make it easier for you to double book because you like to double book. And you described one way that you use your balayage board. So instead of placing one foil at a time on your balayage board, you just go ahead and put a stack and then you take one piece at a time off as you do your sections. You want to describe that?
Yeah, so to prep for my clients when they come in, I like to actually grab a stack of foils and then use my balayage board and lay that stack over the board. Because I double book, I do work with an assistant. However, the assistant is like shampooing or toning or working very hands-on with my other guests. So because of that, I do need to kind of create some ways to help speed up my application process. And having the board preloaded for me with a multiple stack of foils allows me to just flow through the application process a lot quicker versus pausing to place one foil on there at a time.
I would love to know how many colorists do this. I've never seen it, but I'm sure some people do it. I wish that's one of the downsides of podcasting. I can't reach out to the audience and get a poll real quick.
We'll have to post it and we can post this video and then I can put a poll at the bottom on how many stylists do that and you'll get your answer.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Anything else? Any other hacks for making it easier, maybe more efficient for you to double book?
My balayage board is honestly a total game changer for me. So something that makes it easier is how I hold the board because that's the biggest complaint I hear from hairstylists on why they don't use one. Using a balayage board allows me to get better saturation, a better blend, and I'm able to flow through the color process a lot quicker. So I have 2 hacks on how to hold the balayage board. You may have seen these on my Instagram. One of them is the AOK method, and it's a way to foil short hair. So we're literally making an AOK sign and holding the hair with that exact sign. Another one is the water gun, which I discovered in one of my classes, actually. Literally, it's like a water gun. I felt like the water gun was a little bit more PG than a normal gun, so that's why we did that.
Smart. So for the listeners who are not watching this, Krista's just holding out 2 fingers, like a fake gun.
Yeah, literally 2 fingers, and we wrap it around the board and secure with our thumb and remaining 2 fingers. And it holds long hair on a balayage board, which allows me to quickly move through the hair. Yeah,
love it. Love it. Okay, any others?
Ooh, the double book. I'm going to have to go with pre-sectioning too, because a lot of us, we underestimate pre-sectioning. However, I find when I pre-section my model, I'm able to tell myself where the areas on the head are actually going to be seen by my client or my model. So those are the areas I'm going to focus more of my work in.
Okay. Okay. Super smart. Love it. Okay. So when you're in the class, oftentimes when I speak to educators who teach a lot in person, especially, there's always one or two primary things that generate the aha moment for the students. Do you have anything off the top of your head?
That balayage board hack with the stack of the foils.
That's it? Okay. Wow.
I actually had someone, it was the first 10 minutes of class, and I showed them that hack, and they were like, that's it. I'm good. I got my money's worth. That's all we need.
Awesome.
I think an aha moment, trying to think of another one that like really, the balayage board hack is honestly the biggest one. Actually, another aha moment would be I call it the Oreo. It's basically a combination of weaves and slices to create a really bold impact either around the face or on the back of the head. So it's a grouping of 3 foils, starting with a weave, and then right in between is a slice, and then you finish off with another weave. So it's kind of like your Oreo cookie. You're basically creating this slice sandwich, but it's an Oreo. And a gluten-free. I can't have gluten.
A gluten-free Oreo. I know those all too well. My wife is gluten-free. Did you just say you're gluten-free too?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife she's not celiac, but she's gluten intolerant. So she gets hives and stuff that itch her if she has too much gluten. Yeah. So
wow.
That's just kind of the way it goes. Are you gluten-free by choice or are you intolerant?
I've never been diagnosed with celiac. However, when I do consume gluten, I'm throwing up. It's not well.
We have some friends who had a couple of kids, and one of their kids just wasn't eating. And I want to say, maybe until she was 5, they really struggled with getting her to eat enough food. And so they went to various doctors, and they couldn't figure out why. And she seemed otherwise healthy, but she wasn't quite eating enough. And so they did some allergic sort of tests, and they found out that she was allergic to gluten. And so they started putting her on a gluten-free diet. And now she eats, a healthy amount, and it's been, better for her. And she's better as far as her energy and, moods and all that. So it's a real thing, but it's hard to diagnose. That's one of the tricky things about gluten.
Oh, yeah. I know I've missed that point of being diagnosed for it because I would have to consume like 3 to 5 pieces of bread a day for a month or two in order for it to actually show up on a test.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. That's...
Okay, but we digress. This is not an episode about gluten, even though maybe the listeners have learned something, maybe not. Maybe the listeners are just annoyed. Okay, so you're behind the chair. About how many days a week are you behind the chair these days?
I'm behind the chair 3 days a week. I work 3 12-hour days back to back. So I have a similar shift to like a nurse's schedule. I'm Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I have Saturday through Tuesday off, which gives me the opportunity to travel, teach, do some content creating, and then be a co-host of Connect Your Beauty podcast.
Got it. Okay. So with your behind the chair life these days, you noticing any difference? This is our New Year's episode. So you've gone through the holiday season. Do you notice any change in like client behavior, anything you want to talk about?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have been dealing with cancellations a lot. And then a lot of clients also have been taking their budget down a little bit. So instead of coming in for like a full shebang, they're maybe looking for a partial shebang. So they just want like a subtle pop around the face. And I think it's a mix of money, but then I also think it's a mix of natural hair is in. So a lot of people are transitioning into more natural lived in colors, kind of like if they were 10 years old and they played in the sun every single day. So a little pop around the face, a little pop to the ends, but darker and rootier on the top.
Okay, so you've announced that you're going off on your own, independent for education. And what are you going to call it?
I think I'm just going to call it Color by Chris EDU and go off of that because I wanted a good base name to kind of grow from. And I feel like that's where my followers know me as. However, I want to make sure that my education can grow with the industry. So I didn't want to call it one name and then stick with that forever. I wanted to actually have a base and then kind of work off of it each year to actually work with the industry and grow with the industry.
Okay. And you mentioned metaphors, your use of metaphors. Tell the listeners how you like to use metaphors and maybe give us some examples.
Yeah, so I use metaphors behind the chair and as I teach to help students understand why we do what we do and to help them remember things. Because we sit there in a class, we're sitting there for like 6 hours, 7 hours, and all this information, we're absorbing it. However, it can definitely go straight over our head. So I come up with these little metaphors to help students remind themselves of things to do behind the chair as they're working in it. I've had students come message me afterwards after a class and they're like, oh my God, you were in my head all week long. I was thinking of the AOK method, the water gun as I was foiling my client. So an example would be, we talked about earlier on the balayage board and how to hold foils with long hair, short hair, and how to balance it all because it can be a handful. But those are just a small example of some metaphors I use behind the chair. Another one would be the Oreo technique, which we also talked about earlier with the weave, slice, weave. We also have let's go into photography. My J. Penny pose. I absolutely love that one, but it's when my model is resting their elbow on their kneecap and then they're resting their face right on their hand. And so I called it the JC Penny because, they have you do weird poses. So
yes, and they do. And I didn't think that you were young enough to know what the J.C. Penney photography studio did, because that seems like a little bit more of my generation. Like when I was probably 5, that's when my parents threw us in the station wagon and we went down to J.C. Penney and to do those kind of cheesy poses. And by the way, cheesy not because they're not good poses, cheesy because those cheesy backdrops, and everybody knows. How do you know about JC Penney?
So it's actually trending on TikTok right now. People are going, but my parents never took me to JC Penney's to do it and to do the whole photo shoot because my parents are just not very like photogenic people. Or they don't really care they're not, wait, I said that so wrong.
Your parents are, they break the camera.
They break the camera. The camera doesn't know what to do with them. So yeah, JCPenney, it's trending on TikTok right now where people are going to JCPenney's and they're taking these funny photo shoots just for like shits and giggles. And it's funny. Great. So yeah, so when stylists get behind the chair and they're like, I don't know what to pose my client in, I don't know how to do this, they automatically think of, oh my God, the JCPenney pose, let me try that. Yeah. Or, oh my God, like the scrunch pose. There's little things here and there that stylists can automatically think of because of those metaphors.
Hilarious. What would you be doing if you did not become a hairstylist?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. I almost went into school for dentistry. I had a really big gap between my teeth. And so I felt like that resonated with something I could fix or help others. I mean, Eric, this gap was so big. I used to put a Dum Dum lollipop stick through it. It was terrible. It was ginormous. So I wanted to do something to help people. However, I absolutely think I would hate that job. So I don't think I would be a dentist or orthodontist. If I wasn't a hairstylist, I definitely would do something more creative, maybe photography or, gosh, I mean, it's a hard question. I don't imagine myself doing anything else, to be honest. It's a hard one.
So this is one of my favorite questions. Oh, here I am giving you hard questions. I said that I was going to be easy on you because of your concussion, your mind is healing, but I'm still going to ask you these questions. Okay. I'm fascinated with just the relationship between the client and the beauty professional because it's such a unique relationship that oftentimes is formed over so many years. In many cases, obviously, everybody has a first appointment with somebody. And of course, some clients never come back. So you get kind of an interesting blend of strangers in your chair, for could be 45 minutes, could be 4 hours. And then your very next client could be one of your best friends that you've known for 10 years. And you have all of this time that you spend with this person. And some of that conversation could be very positive and constructive and heartwarming. And some of those conversations could be horrible and emotionally taxing. So what is the most difficult conversation you've ever had with a client in your chair?
Difficult conversation, I would say, would be, are you referring to a conversation I had had to have with the client, like firing them, or emotionally with like balancing like a loss of a loved one?
Either.
Either or. Oh, I would say the most difficult conversation I had to have with the client was I was working behind the chair and I had a toner sitting on my guest. And, in that time of the toner processing, you go to the back room, you clean up for a second, you check your phone. Well, in that time I had checked my phone, I had found out somebody very close to me passed away.
Oh.
So I mean, this is when teamwork came in, and this is why I love the salon I work at, because in that time for me to get my stuff together, try and like wipe the tears away and then go back out there to finish my guest, I had my teammates, they stepped in, they rinsed the toner, they gave her the treatment, and then they brushed her out for me and started the blow dry. So by the time I was able to go back out there, I was able to have that conversation with her on, hey, this is something I'm currently experiencing. This is something I'm currently going through. I'm happy to be doing your hair because this is the one thing I can control right now. But I just wanted to let you know why that had transpired. So I would say that was the hardest conversation to have, to, pull it together and just be real. But I do believe that brought us closer together.
Yeah.
Because
Interesting.
And it kind of gave a perspective of like, yeah, we're human too. Yes, we're service providers. Yes, we are there to make our clients feel good, but we have bad days too. We have personal things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that. So who's inspiring you in the industry right now?
Right now, I'm incredibly inspired by Philip Foresto. Did I say that right?
Yes. Philip Foresto. Philip Foresto, and that's how you spell it. That's how you pronounce it. And that's how it's spelled on Instagram. So it's Philip with one L and then Foresto, Foresto.
Yeah, so I love Philip's work and his content. I mean, his work behind the chair obviously is beautiful, but one thing I do really enjoy about him and that inspires me about him is his personality. He is not only a great educator, but he also is funny and he's just great to watch. I saw him at the Masters of Balayage Hero Retreat, and he's a trip. And I love that kind of energy. I love, channeling that in classes and being able to just make people feel good and laugh. And it's contagious,
Yeah. Tell us about the pod. What is it called? It's called, hold on, Connect Through Beauty.
Yes. So Connect Through Beauty 2.0, well, Connect Through Beauty was actually created by Ashley Rivera, who is who I do the podcast with. She reached out to me just like, we did here today, where she's like, hey, I want to interview you and bring you on the podcast. We did an interview, and then afterwards she's like, I just felt a really strong pull, and what are your thoughts we do this together? Like, have you ever considered this? And honestly, a podcaster was like never really something I thought about doing, but I thought about being a guest artist on a podcast, but never actually hosting my own. Mm-hmm. So this was a journey that was like completely new to me. And like we talked about in the beginning of this episode, like saying yes to everything and doing new things. I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. So me and Ashley, it's funny. We've never met in person before.
Funny.
Everything through Zoom. I know the day we meet, it's going to be like, we already know each other and we sit down, talk all the time. So we do this through Zoom and then basically launch an episode every Tuesday. We took a break during the holiday season just because we were busy. We know stylists are busy. And then in the new year, we'll kind of revamp everything and build that back up.
Very good. And so how many episodes have you guys done together?
Oh, gosh. I want to say maybe like 10. I actually don't have that number. I don't have that
Okay.
answer.
That's okay. And is it easier or harder than you thought?
I would say it is definitely harder than I thought, because not only is the podcast a lot when you're sitting here talking, but the prep leading up to that podcast
Yes.
on everything.
No doubt about it. It is a lot of work. And, I often lament the fact that you don't have a two-way communication with the audience. It's the opposite of doing something live in front of humans in person, where you get all sorts of feedback, right? You get verbal feedback, you get the body language feedback where you can look at somebody, on the third row, and you can see what their reaction was to something you said or something that just happened or a question that was just asked. And that kind of, you can use that to, guide you a little bit in the way that you're communicating. But podcasting is the opposite. You're just doing it in a bubble, and then you put it out there for people to absorb. And so you don't always get that feedback, but it's fun. It's fun.
I found it was the hardest thing for me was the transition between the questions, like how to finish it off and then like pass it over to Ashley, and then, us pass it back and forth. It's like we're playing a game of tennis, but I suck at tennis. So it's like I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. So then you get awkward pauses and all this kind of stuff. And you don't want to spend 4 hours going back and editing. You could go back and edit out those pauses. No, I totally get it. Maybe that's why I don't have a guest host. I think I don't have a guest host because maybe that's like one additional layer of complexity of having to schedule a guest host to be on for every episode. It's hard enough to schedule. Donovan, I'm lucky enough that Donovan schedules the guests. And, as we were saying at the beginning of the episode, you had to cancel. And that happens, of course. Sometimes I have to cancel. Sometimes our guest has to cancel. Obviously, it's normal. But Donovan spends a lot of his time just scheduling. And so if we had to have a guest host, that would be one additional person that we would have to schedule. And that guest host would inevitably be a beauty professional who has clients, behind the chair or whatever. And so I would love to have it. And I've even asked some people in the past to be guest hosts, and they're like, oh my God, that would be amazing. I would love to do that with you. But we just haven't actually done it yet.
Yeah. And I'm sure figuring out a time that works for both of you guys, it's so limited.
Totally. Okay, so here we are. This is January 1st, 2024, if you can believe it. And we've got this new year to look forward to. We have the old year to either look fondly upon or forget, depending on how your year was. And here we are. So I'm going to hand you the New Year's 2024 wand, and you can wave it and change anything about the industry. What would your answer be?
I was waiting for this question because I would say if I were to wave a wand and change something about the industry, I would change the fact that beauty professionals think we can't all succeed or we can't all be at the top. I would wave it and, make everyone have the belief or the understanding that we can all be at the top and we can all thrive together. That's the beauty of this industry. We all have a superpower about us, and that's going to allow people to gravitate towards you and attract the right people. And I would just let everyone know, like, hey, there is room for everyone at the top.
I totally agree. And I say this all the time, that there's a lot of potential clients out there. I call them potential clients because they're not going to the salon very often. Mm-hmm. I used to do the man on the street interviews where I would have a microphone pre-COVID, and the number of people that I would talk to who would just admit they haven't been to the salon in 8 months or whatever. And they're like, I'd love to go to the salon, but I haven't found a hairstylist. And there's lots of people out there who are ripe for the picking. Mm-hmm. For, hairdressers who are good at marketing or good at walking up to strangers and introducing themselves or all that kind of stuff. So I think your point is a great one.
Yeah, there's so many personalities out there, and, we are what we attract, and I find we are going to attract the right people in our chair.
Do you know the next question I'm going to ask you?
I don't.
Do you expect me to ask you the hair horror story question?
Oh, no, I actually didn't expect that one.
You didn't expect that one. You expected the wave the wand question. Okay. So here's my hair horror story question. Do you have any hair horror stories? And this could be behind it. This could be your client, or it could be somebody else in the salon that you watched.
Okay, hair horror story, I would say would be firing one of my first clients ever. I think that is super horrific and super terrifying to do. And it definitely was not handled super well. I mean, thankfully, all is good. I'm still alive here today, so all is well. But her reaction definitely is very, very, very scary. I had to fire her because she had unrealistic expectations and she loved to tell me how to do my job. So I don't put up with that in my chair. I'm all for, working with a client if they're super particular. However, there's a fine line between telling me what you want and then telling me how to do it. So firing that client is probably my hair horror story because I immediately cried in the salon afterwards. It was the first time I cried in the salon. So I'll never forget that. I will never forget that.
Okay, so what did you say?
So I sat down with her and I told her that, I think I've loved doing your hair and I really enjoy, our conversation. However, I think it's best you find a new stylist to continue your blonding journey with, because due to, your goals and your expectations, I cannot reach that. And I want you to be happy with your hair.
And she responded?
She fought with me a little bit. She said, because she was unhappy with her toner at the time. And so she's like, oh, it's not the toner. Like, no, I always loved my hair. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I feel a little different. But she responded, she walked out, didn't tip me, which is fine. I usually don't expect that, but yeah, stormed out of the salon and I never saw her again. And she actually called recently to try and book an appointment again. And, the file popped up and it's like,
right.
Do book. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what, this was at the end of an appointment and she was complaining about it.
Yes. So she had told me I did her hair. It was the second time I did her hair. The first time, I can always tell like a red flag when somebody sits in my chair. However, I also think it's super nerve-wracking seeing new stylists. So I'm understanding with that. So I definitely saw the signs a little bit early, did her hair. She was super happy with it. She came back 4 months later for us to do it again. And she sat down and she said, I need to sit under that dryer for an hour and a half. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And just like told me a list of all the things to do. And that's when I was like, okay. So I did her hair that day, made sure she was happy with it, and then had the conversation with her about, I will not be servicing you again. Because, clients do wait a really long time to sit in my chair. So I don't want to turn that client away at first, because then it can take them a couple months to get another appointment with another stylist. So trying to be considerate of that. But that was a horror story. I have nightmares about that client.
Yeah, not fun at all. Not fun at all. Any last words for the community?
Any last words? I would say if there's one thing somebody takes out of this podcast, and this is something that I start my classes with and I'll finish my classes with, you're never too young to achieve your dreams and you're never too old to start.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. What, and that kind of buttons up a lot of what we talked about, a lot of the themes that we talked about. Some generational sort of ideas. I talked about I contrasted my parents to my kids and the way that, they do things together. So I love that. This was awesome. Thank you so much, Krista, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I'm happy to be on here. So when I first started in the industry, I have a 35-minute commute to work, and I would listen to podcasts that kind of helped kill the time. And the Hair Game podcast was the first hair podcast I ever started listening to. I would sit there and listen to you ask these questions to your guest artist. And sometimes I would actually ask myself how I would answer that and picture myself in that moment. So it's really cool to be here today and to be actually answering the questions.
That's amazing. I have chills right now. That's just so cool. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for listening so long ago. And I mean, early in your career, and so happy. That's why I do it. Frankly, that's why I do it week in and week out. And I think it's been, is it 5 years or is it 6 years? 5 or 6 years. Well, 2017 is when we started doing this. So I guess that's 6 years. Holy mackerel.
Wow.
So, well, thank you for saying that. And I really, really appreciate it. And so cool that you were on and you're able to answer those questions years and years later. I just love that.
It is pretty cool, especially that magic wand one. I've been thinking about that since probably 5 years ago, honestly.
That's amazing. Is that how long I've been asked? I know that the hair horror story came from Jacob Kahn, who's on your side of the country. And because that was something he always wanted. He always wanted to have a podcast talking about horror stories. And he's got a podcast, which is a comedy based podcast, sometimes dealing with hair. But he gave me that idea. So I know I've been asking that one for at least 4 or 5 years. But interesting about the wave of the wand one, because I did not consider that one of my first questions, but I guess now that you mentioned that, it is. So super interesting and so happy to have you on.
Oh, happy to be here. So thank you.